Walking Dead of Berwick. Subscribe now, brave listener, for the tale you're about to hear is one wrapped in cold mist and centuries of dread. The chilling legend of the Walking Dead of Berwick, nestled on the Scottish border in the 12th century. The once thriving town of Berwick-upon-Tweed harboured not only merchants and fishermen, but also secrets whispered in the dark and footsteps echoing from beyond the grave. In the year of our Lord, 1161, a sinister unease crept into the heart of Berwick. It began subtly, the snapping of twigs beneath an empty window, the uneasy silence of livestock at night, and the inexplicable sickness that befell the healthy. The townsfolk, weary yet hardened by border conflicts and coastal tempests, soon found themselves facing a terror not of man, but of the dead. The first to speak of it was a widow who lived by the eastern gate. She awoke one night to the sound of soft tapping at her door. When she dared look, there was no one, only muddy footprints leading away into the night. The next morning, she found the footprints had returned, looping endlessly in front of her cottage. Within a week, she was found dead, her face twisted in a grimace of fear, her hands clutching at her own throat. Whispers grew. Townsfolk claimed to see a gaunt, grey figure roaming near the churchyard. A shepherd swore on St. Iadon's bones that he saw a man long dead from the pox walking through the misty moors at dawn, his burial shroud trailing like seaweed. Skeptics laughed, but the laughter faded as more tales emerged of the dead returning, of grave dirt tracked into homes, and of eyes like glass marbles watching from darkened hedgerows. The local priest, Father William of Gedborough, refused to believe in such superstition. Yet, after being called to give rites to a man who had died without illness or wound, save for the fact his face was locked in a silent scream, he began to worry. A council was called in the town square. Men from the priory, local lords, and the town's aldermen gathered under a moonless sky. And from the crowd came a voice, an aged woman known as Mary the Mad, once a healer, now a recluse. "The dead rise because their souls are restless," she croaked. "They walk when they are denied peace. Dig, and ye shall see." The people scoffed, until she led them to the churchyard. There, with trembling hands and a rusted spade, she pointed to 3 graves. When the men dug, they found not rest, but horror. The bodies were torn from within, their nails broken, their mouths full of earth, as if they had clawed their way out. Panic gripped the town. Bells tolled at all hours. Bonfires were lit too, chase away shadows. Crucifixes were hung in every home, and salt scattered across thresholds. But still, the deaths continued. Some victims were found drained of blood, others with limbs askew, as if violently torn. Dogs howled without end. Infants wailed at unseen terrors. It was then that a knight-errant, Sir Godric of Lothian, arrived in Berwick. Clad in mail and bearing the cross of Jerusalem on his cloak, he claimed knowledge of such afflictions. In the East they call them revenants, he said, his voice low. The dead who walk not by their will, but driven by fury, betrayal, or curse. He instructed the townsfolk to dig out the disturbed graves and burn the bodies under holy rites. The first pyre was lit near the ruined abbey. As the flames licked the sky, a wind howled so fierce that it shattered windows in the town below. The ground trembled, and from the woods came a keening wail, unlike any beast or man. But the fires worked for a time. Then came the winter of pale eyes. It began with a merchant's daughter, who vanished from her room, though her door was locked, and the shutters barred. She was found days later, standing ankle-deep in the icy river, her eyes gone and her hands clasped as if in prayer. That night, a dozen villagers saw figures, translucent, shivering, shrieking, glide across the frozen fields. Crops withered under the snow, and the cows birthed stillborn calves with twisted limbs. Father William, shaken, turned to the old texts hidden deep in the priory's vaults. In one leather-bound volume, a Latin translation from a lost Irish script, he found a reference to the anima restituenda, or restless spirits. These, it said, were not demons, but souls cast out by improper burial or unresolved vengeance. To banish them, not fire alone was needed, but remembrance. Sir Godric, upon hearing this, ventured into the woods where the keening had last echoed. What he found was a burial mound, long forgotten, desecrated by time and bandits. Bones lay scattered, some broken, others gnawed by wolves. It was here, he believed, the source of the evil lay. A great rite was prepared. The town fasted for 3 days. Then, led by priest and knight, the people gathered at the mound. They sang psalms and laid the bones to rest, each given name and honor, even if only guessed. Candles lit the night like stars fallen to earth. As the last prayer ended, a cry broke from the mound, high, agonized, fading into silence. Then stillness. The dead no longer walked, but to this day, when fog descends upon Berwick, and the wind carries a whisper that chills the spine, the elders speak lowly of the winter of pale eyes, and warn, bury your dead with peace, or they shall walk again. Asterisk. The silence after the final cry from the mound was not one of peace. It was the stillness of a forest just before a storm breaks. Berwick slept uneasily that night. No spectres stirred, and no footprints haunted thresholds. Yet a sense of unfinished things lingered in the air, like the damp of a fog that had not yet formed, or the smell of smoke when the fire is long gone. Sir Godric remained another though the priest believed the curse lifted, the knight was not convinced. He patrolled the fields at dawn and watched the churchyard at dusk. Once he spotted a boy throwing stones into the river and asked if he feared the dead might rise again. The boy, pale and thin, looked up with eyes like splinters of night and replied, "They never went back, sir. They just stopped walking." Then the boy vanished. His parents awoke to find the front door open, the snow inside undisturbed, no tracks leading out. Only his shoes remained, sitting neatly by the hearth. It was not long after that the dreams began. Dozens of villagers, young and old, came to Father William with trembling hands and pale faces. They spoke of dreams filled with whispering voices, of standing alone in endless fields under moonless skies, of hands reaching up from beneath the soil, pulling, grasping. Many claimed to wake with dirt under their fingernails, their feet cold and muddy as if they had been outside. But their doors remained locked, their homes untouched. Among these sufferers was a young woman named Ieda, whose grandfather had died during the early hauntings. She claimed to see him nightly in her dreams, though his face was hollow and sagging, and his eyes wept blood. "He asks why I let them bury him where they did," she cried. "He says it's cold where no prayers are said." Disturbed, the townsfolk once again summoned the priest and the knight. Sir Godric, who had begun to doubt the sufficiency of their past rites, spoke of a second cause, desecration. "It is not merely unrest," he said grimly. "Some force beckons them, holds them, some oath broken, or some wrong unanswered." The town began to search for causes. The priory's ledgers were examined, old disputes rehashed. It was then that Father William stumbled upon a parchment wedged in a crumbling wall behind the altar. A document sealed by wax so ancient its sigil had faded. Translated with care, it revealed a tale forgotten by time, a secret trial held in Berwick during the reign of David I. A man of noble birth had been executed, not by axe, but by burial alive, for heresy and treason. His name was stricken from all records, his estate dissolved. The trial was never sanctified by church authority. His grave was hidden, unblessed. A curse was scrawled on the bottom of the parchment. In a different hand, those who silence the truth shall sleep no more. Sir Godric believed this to be the fulcrum of the curse. A man wronged in death, condemned without ritual, forgotten by time. A noble bloodline buried beneath shame and soil. They sought the grave with urgency. Mary the Mad, now revered as the town's seer, led them to the northern edge of Berwick, where an ancient oak stood gnarled and dying. She said she'd always felt the cold there, not of wind or winter, but of memory. Asterisk. They dug beneath the roots, 6 feet down, wrapped in a ragged cloak of crimson silk and sealed in a coffin of iron. They found him, or what remained. The skeleton lay twisted, the skull cracked where it had beaten against the coffin's lid. Yet, in his hands was a cross, inverted but clutched tightly. As though in protest or desperation, a tribunal was hastily called. The town, led by priest and knight, performed a posthumous absolution. They reburied the body in the consecrated cemetery with full rites. A name was not spoken, for none dared guess it. But his new grave bore a simple inscription carved by Father William himself. He whom we wronged, we now return. For a time, peace held. The dreams stopped. The strange deaths ceased. Children laughed again in Berwick streets. The church bells rang in joy, not mourning, but peace in Berwick, like fog on the moors, was never built to last. In the spring of 1163, 2 years after the rites, ships came to Berwick's port bearing traders from the Baltic. With them came goods, coin, and something else. It began again, faint, elusive. A sailor was found drowned in a well, though the bucket was untouched. A black dog was seen walking the ridge above the abbey every night for a week. Then the graveyard began to stir. First, it was the scent, sweet, cloying, like rotted flowers. Then the soil began to sink, uneven and soft even in the dry sun. A mason, working near the southern wall, claimed he heard voices beneath his feet, whispering in tongues he did not know. Sir Godric had long since left Berwick, called back to Lothian by duty. In his place, the townsfolk turned to Mary. Old, bent, nearly double, she moved with difficulty but spoke with clarity. "This is no longer unrest," she said. "Something came with the sails, something that calls not to the dead, but from them." They found the cause in the belongings of a merchant who had died aboard one of the foreign ships. Among silks and spices was a carved stone, smooth as bone, and covered in runes not of any known tongue. It pulsed faintly in the moonlight, and animals refused to go near it. Mary ordered it taken to the sea and cast into the deepest waters beyond. Holy island, but 3 men who carried it vanished. Their boat drifted back to shore, empty save for red-stained ropes. Father William, aging and weary, prayed harder than he ever had, but his dreams, too, grew haunted. He saw Berwick in flames, its people walking without eyes, their mouths open in silent screams. And over all of it, a great figure cloaked in black feathers, eyes like burning coals, rising from the old burial mound. The vision haunted Father William night and day. He spent hours at the altar, kneeling before the cross, praying not just for guidance, but for forgiveness. He feared they had not ended the curse, but merely diverted its course. And now, something older, darker, had been drawn to Berwick like a moth to dying embers. And then came the children, first one, then another, vanished from locked rooms. They were taken in the twilight hours, their small beds left undisturbed, their candles still burning low. Sometimes a ribbon or doll was missing with them, but more often only silence remained. A fisherman claimed to see them walking at the edge of the tide one evening, holding hands, their faces emotionless and eyes black as the sea. The town was thrown into hysteria. Fathers took to patrolling the woods with torches and swords. Mothers wept at the altar steps. The Lord of Berwick, summoned from Dunbar, ordered a curfew and demanded an explanation from the priory. But there was no answer the clergy could give. Only warnings and prayers. Maher, whose health had declined, made a final effort. She called for Father William and asked to be taken to the burial mound one last time. With the help of villagers, they carried her on a wooden cart to the place where the ritual had once been held. As she lay beneath the stars, she whispered one word repeatedly: feathers. No one understood, not at first. But Father William remembered the vision, the figure cloaked in black feathers. He returned to the priory and searched feverishly through the forbidden texts, those kept from common eyes by order of the bishopric. In a tome translated from the Norse, he found a match: a white king, a spectral lord of ravens and frost, known in sagas as Scarred the Hollow. He was said to walk where the blood of wronged men soaked the earth, feeding on injustice and latching to cursed places like a tick on flesh. Berwick, with its history of secret trials, desecrated graves, and broken rites, was a feast. Father William penned letters to every bishop, abbot, and knightly order he could, begging for aid. Only one replied, a monk from Iona, an island abbey far to the west, who claimed to know the rites of binding and banishment, but warned they came at great cost. That monk, Brother Terran, arrived with a wooden chest bound in silver chains. He was blind in one eye and bore the marks of fire across his hands. Yet he spoke with certainty and calm. He demanded that the burial mound be exhumed once more, and that no one speak aloud beneath the moonlight. They did as he asked. As they dug, the earth trembled. Cries echoed from below. Some swore they saw bones clawing at the air, though no corpses rose. When they reached the core of the mound, Brother Terran opened his chest and drew forth a mirror, framed in bone and wrapped in runic scripture. This shows not the dead, he said, but the truth they leave behind. When he held the mirror to the hollow, the reflection showed not soil, but a throne of crows and a man without eyes sitting upon it, weeping blood into the ground. The rite began at midnight, under a sky scraped clean of stars. Brother Terran marked a circle around the burial mound with consecrated ash and bloodied iron. He instructed the townsfolk to remain beyond its boundary, and in solemn silence, no one dared speak. Even the wind held its breath. Within the circle, he began to chant, not in Latin, nor in Gaelic, but in a tongue that made the hairs on every listener's neck rise. It sounded like the cracking of frost on a frozen lake, like the calls of carrion birds echoing over a battlefield. As the incantation grew, so too did the darkness around the mound, thickening like smoke, pulsing like a heartbeat. Father William, standing just beyond the circle, clutched his crucifix, and dared not blink. From the earth within the mound came a rattling, not as of digging, but of bones grinding against stone. And then a figure rose. It was not a corpse, nor a ghost, but something between, a wraith of black plumage and broken flesh, crowned in rusted metal. Its face was a mask of shadow, eyes absent, yet somehow watching them all. It bore no mouth, yet they heard it speak, not in their ears, but in their thoughts. Like a wind whispering scenes into a confessional, it named itself, scarred, and it laughed. The sound cracked stones and turned milk sour in the distant farmhouses. The trees beyond the hill bent away as if in terror. You burn the bones, but leave the root, it rasped. You bury memory, and think truth dies with it. Brother Taran did not answer. He stepped forward with the bone-framed mirror and held it before the wraith-scarred, hissed dot within the mirror. Its form was different, not a god or king, but a man in chains, buried alive, screaming as stones were piled upon his chest. It was not power that animated him, but agony. Taran began the final prayer, a plea to the saints of the Western Isles, to the nameless martyrs of forgotten wars, and to the souls who slept in peace. The mirror pulsed, the ash ring ignited. Scarred screamed, and as he screamed, so too did the earth, and from beneath the mound 100 hands clawed upward, reaching not for vengeance, but for release. These were not the cursed, these were the bound, those buried without rites, slain in silence and forgotten by time. Taran cried out, "Name them," and one by one the villagers did. They named their kin lost in border wars, children taken by illness, wives lost in childbirth, grandfathers who vanished in snowstorms, all whose deaths had passed unblessed. Each name weakened. The shadow, at last, with a thunderclap, the mirror shattered. The feathered form of Scarred was torn apart in a gust of cinders and wind. The bones below sank back into the soil like snow melting into spring. Earth's silence returned. Brother Taran collapsed, his robes smouldering. He died with a prayer on his lips. Beric, at last, was still. After the rite, no voice spoke from the shadows again. The dead lay undisturbed. No footprints marked the doorsteps. The candles in homes stayed lit through the night without flickering to unseen winds. Beric healed, but it did not forget. Brother Taran was buried beside the chapel, a grave marked with simple stone. He who bore the fire for the peace of the forgotten, his name became a prayer among the people. Children born in the spring of that year were named Taran or Tara, as if the town wished to weave his sacrifice into the fabric of its future. But time, like the tide, erodes memory. Within a generation, the rites became legend, and the legend fable. Skeptics among the younger priests denied the truth of it, claiming it was mass hysteria or paganism disguised as miracle. The church forbade the reading of Brother Taran's texts, and the mirror fragments were locked in a reliquary there. Script deemed heretical. Asterisk, yet those who remembered the old ones, who still lit a candle on winter nights, who placed sprigs of heather at the cemetery gates, knew better. They would point to the crooked tree on the mound and whisper warnings. To travelers, do not speak ill of the unburied. Do not mock the grief of the earth. And in the decades that followed, when fog would creep once more into Burik's alleys, and dogs whimper in their sleep, and windows rattle without wind, some would wake at midnight with a single word echoing. In their dreams, feathers. Even now, the winds that sweep down from the Lammermuir hills carry strange scents through the crooked streets of Berwick. A parish child once asked why the old church gates were always locked at sundown. The elders did not answer, but that night they placed rosemary on their windowsills. Modern travelers speak of Berwick's charm, its ancient walls and sea-salted air. They do not hear the stillness that settles in the hours before dawn. They do not see the shadows watching from the churchyard's edge, where no grass grows and the soil stays soft even in summer. But the town remembers when burials are held. They are done with care. Names are spoken, stories shared. Soil is not shoveled in silence. Coins are left on the gravestones, a fare for peace or passage, none can say. And on stormy nights, when the crows gather in numbers too great to count, and a strange keening rises over the rooftops, Berwick does not light torches, nor call for aid. It listens, and prays the dead are still at rest. House of covered mirrors *. I used to clean houses for a living. Not full-time, just side work I picked up through an app that connected cleaners with homeowners. It was decent money, flexible hours. Most of the jobs were unremarkable people too, busy to scrub their baseboards or too tired to clean up after their kids. Nothing dramatic. This one house, though, I think about it more than I should. It was last spring. I had just moved to a smaller town outside Manchester, needed extra cash. So I opened up the app and grabbed whatever gigs I could find. The listing said, deep clean requested, 4-bedroom house, no pets, no smoking. Please do not move any covered mirrors. That last line gave me pause. I reread it. Please do not move any covered mirrors. I thought it might be a religious thing, or maybe the owners just didn't want their antiques disturbed. Either way, I figured, not my business. I arrived around 10 a.m. It was a gloomy Thursday, the kind where everything feels like it's stuck in grayscale. The house was on the edge of town, sort of tucked into a cul-de-sac with trees leaning in around it. Older style, but kept up well. Pale brick, dark blue shutters. Looked normal enough. No one was home when I got there, but they had left a key. Under the mat and instructions taped to the front door. Same stuff as the listing, plus a checklist inside. They'd already prepaid. The moment I stepped inside, something felt ... off. I don't mean cold spots or ghost vibes. Just ... quiet. Too quiet. Houses have sounds. A refrigerator hums, wood creaks, pipes settle. But this place was silent. Like it was holding its breath. The air smelled faintly of lavender, like someone had sprayed air freshener a day or two ago. Everything was tidy. Not clean, but tidy. No dishes in the sink. No shoes by the door. The kind of tidy that made me think. No one really lived there. I started with the kitchen. Usual stuff. Wipe down counters. Scrub the oven. Nothing weird. It was only when I moved into the dining room that I noticed the first covered mirror. It was a tall, rectangular thing, leaning against the far wall behind the dining table, draped in a heavy black cloth, the kind you might use to block out sunlight. It was pinned in place at the top. Didn't flutter. Didn't move. I remembered the note. Do not move any covered mirrors. Okay, fine by me. But as I kept cleaning, I started realizing they were everywhere, in the hallway, in each bedroom. All covered, different sizes, some small, some huge. Every single one wrapped in black cloth. By the time I got to the upstairs bathroom, I counted 7 mirrors, all covered the same way. It felt less like a design choice and more like ... fear. That's when things started feeling strange in the main bedroom. I was vacuuming near the far corner when I heard a noise, like fabric shifting. I turned quickly, thinking maybe I had brushed the curtain or the vacuum cord had caught on something. But the mirror in the room, full-length standing mirror by the wardrobe bits cover, had slipped, just slightly, maybe an inch, enough to see a sliver of glass. I froze. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even been near it. I walked over and gently pinned the cloth back where it had slipped. As I did, I glanced at the reflection, and I swear to God, I saw the room just as it was, but I wasn't in it. No reflection of me, just the room. I backed away fast. My heart was pounding. I told myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe I didn't get close enough to be seen. I avoided the mirror the rest of the time I cleaned that room. In the hallway, another cloth had slipped. This time, it was one of those small oval mirrors. I didn't even think. I pinned it back without looking. But when I turned away, I saw something move in the reflection. Just a flicker, a shadow. Nothing distinct, just movement. But there was no one else in the house. I finished cleaning faster than usual. I didn't bother triple-checking my work like I normally do. I just wanted out. Before I left, I stood in the foyer, staring at one last covered mirror. This one was different. Bigger, wider, mounted above the fireplace. Its cloth was darker, heavier. The edges were sealed with pins. I don't know what came over me, but I reached up and touched the fabric. It was ice cold, not room temperature, not drafty, cold. I turned and left. The app let me leave feedback for the client. I didn't. I figured if they were strange enough to live like that, they probably wouldn't care what I had to say. That night, though I dreamed about the house, I dreamed I was walking through it, room to room. All the cloths were gone. Every mirror was uncovered. And in every reflection, there were people standing just out of frame. Still, silent. The next morning, I felt drained. Not just tired drained. Like something had taken up space inside me overnight. I kept glancing at the mirror in my hallway. It was covered now with an old beach towel. I had thrown it over the frame without thinking, sometime after waking. From the dream at around noon, I got a notification from the app. The same house. Another request. Double the rate. No message from the client, just a note. Upstairs bathroom needs attention. Mirrors must remain covered. Please be prompt. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want to go back. Every part of me said, no, but I hadn't worked in a week. My bank account was almost empty. I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I was tired that day. Maybe the lighting had played tricks on me. Maybe it was just a weird dream. I accepted the job. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed two things. First, the curtains were all drawn. Every window. Second, the front door was cracked open, just barely. Just enough. I stood outside for a good 2 minutes, debating whether to go in. Then I knocked. No answer. Hello. I called. Nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. The air inside was different, mustier. Still no sounds. The same checklist was there, on the table by the door, but now it had a hand-drawn map of the upstairs. A red X over the bathroom. That was it. No signature, no note. Just that I went upstairs. Each step felt like it was taking too long. The hall was darker than I remembered. I passed the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, still covered. No movement this time. I didn't even glance at it. The bathroom door was open. I stepped inside. It looked normal, cleaner than I expected. Toilet was flushed. Towels neatly folded. The mirror above the sink was covered like the other's black cloth, pinned tight. Then I saw the note taped to the mirror. Do not uncover. If cloth is removed, do not speak to her. That's when I started shaking. Speak to who? I backed out of the bathroom, thought about leaving. But I heard something then. A whisper, faint, but there. Coming from behind the mirror. A woman's voice, muffled, like she was underwater. Can you help me? It said. I stood, frozen. Every muscle in my legs wanted to run, but my hand moved before I could stop it. I touched the cloth, and from the other side of the mirror, the voice changed, louder, closer. Don't leave me alone in here. I turned and ran, left everything. I didn't care anymore. Never went back. Never accepted another cleaning job. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I heard a voice from my hallway mirror. I keep it covered. I keep them all covered. But sometimes when I walk past them, I swear I see someone else's breath fogging the glass. Not mine, and I don't stop to look. Not anymore. It's been 6 months since I was in that house. I never reported it. What would I even say? Hi, yeah, I heard a woman's voice behind a mirror in an empty house, and then ran away like a lunatic. Can you arrest a haunted mirror? I kept telling myself I imagined it, that stress and money problems were messing with my head, but something followed me. I don't mean that in a supernatural, horror movie kind of way. There's just this presence now, like I'm never really alone in a room anymore. Especially when there's a mirror. At first it was just feelings. A chill when I brushed my teeth. A shadow at the edge of the frame that disappeared when I turned, that sort of thing. I blamed it on bad sleep. Then the reflections started to change. Subtle things. I'd be looking in the bathroom mirror, and the towel behind me would be hanging differently. Or I'd glance at the hallway mirror and see the door behind me closed when it was open. I thought I was losing it. I booked an eye exam. I started journaling my days to track if I was having memory lapses. Everything came back normal. And then, one night, I woke up to the sound of glass cracking. It was around 3 a.m., pitch dark. I sat up, heart racing. Listened. Another crack. Not shattering, just a sharp, thin crack, like someone tapping on a frozen window pane. It was coming. From the mirror in my bedroom. I'd covered that mirror 2 weeks earlier. Old bedsheet, duct taped around the frame. It was leaning against the wall in the corner. I hadn't looked at it since, but I could hear the sound again. Slow, rhythmic, tap, crack, tap. I told myself it was nothing. Old house, pipes, expansion and contraction. All those things you Google at 3 a.m. when you're trying to keep calm. Then, I heard it again. Not a crack this time. A voice. Why won't you let me out? I didn't move. I just sat there in bed, staring at that lump in the corner where the mirror was covered. I couldn't even blink. I don't know how long I sat. Like that. Minutes. An hour. It felt like forever. The voice didn't speak again, but I felt her, watching me. Through the sheet, the next day, I threw the mirror out, took it to the dump myself, broke it in half with a crowbar before tossing it into the bin. I thought maybe, somehow, that would be the end of it. But that night, the hallway mirror cracked. I hadn't touched it, hadn't looked at it in weeks. I found a long, thin fracture down the middle, like someone had drawn a fingernail across it. There was writing under the crack. Faint, like condensation marks. It said, "I know what you saw." I called in sick for a week. Didn't leave the apartment. Covered every mirror I had. Even the one on the microwave. I bought blackout curtains. I stopped using my phone camera, didn't FaceTime anyone, avoided anything with a reflection, but I knew it wasn't over. It's not about the house, it's about her, whoever or whatever was behind that mirror in the bathroom. She's not trapped in that house anymore. I think when I touched the cloth, when I listened to her, I let her follow me. It's not all the time. Some days I almost forget, but every so often, in the middle of something normal, cooking, brushing my teeth, folding laundry, I'll catch a reflection where there shouldn't be one. Once, I was boiling pasta, and I saw a face reflected in the pot lid. Not mine, pale, expressionless, just for a second. Last week, I opened the fridge and saw a smudge on the chrome handle that looked exactly like a handprint from the inside dot, and now there's this mirror that keeps appearing in my closet. I never put it there. It's small, round, no frame, just leaning against the wall behind my coats. I've thrown it out 3 times. Every morning, it's back, and every time I uncover it, just to check, it shows something different behind me. A hallway that's not mine, a room I've never seen. Once, it showed the bathroom from that house, covered mirror and all. I don't know what she wants. I don't even know what she is. All I know is she's still watching, waiting, and every night, before I go to bed, I make sure every mirror in my flat is covered, because I'm terrified one night I'll hear her voice again, and this time, she won't be asking for help. She'll be telling me it's my turn. It's been over a year now. I've moved 3 times since the house, switched jobs, changed my number, deleted the app, did everything I could to start over. But it hasn't stopped. Wherever I go, the mirrors follow. I don't mean literally the same mirrors, different ones, but it's always the same pattern. I'll move into a new place, and at first, everything seems fine. Then I'll catch something in the corner of my eye, a shape, a movement, a breath that fogs the glass just a moment too long. Then the whispering starts, always late, always soft, like it's inside the walls. Sometimes I think I hear her humming. The worst part is how normal it's starting to feel. I still cover every reflective surface. I use paper over the bathroom mirror now, taped like I'm trying to black out the world. I don't own a TV. My laptop's webcam is taped. My phone screen is always dimmed, and I avoid the front-facing camera like it's poison. But even with all that, I feel her. When I sleep, I dream of her face. I never see it fully, just glimpses in water or glass or chrome. She's always behind something, and I always wake up before she speaks. Until last night. Last night, I didn't wake up in time. In the dream, I was back in the house. Same hallway. Same heavy silence. I knew where I was the moment I stepped inside. The walls breathed. The floor creaked in rhythm with my heart. I walked up the stairs, through the hall, to the bathroom. The mirror was uncovered, not smashed, not covered. Just there, and I saw her. She was me. She had my face, my eyes, my clothes, but she wasn't me. She smiled, slow and unnatural, like her skin was too tight. Her head tilted in that way dogs do when they hear something you can't. Then she spoke. I've been patient. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just stared at this reflection that wasn't mine. You opened the door, she said. You listened. Then her eyes went black, completely, like ink spreading in water. You gave me a name. I woke up gasping, sweat-soaked, heart pounding. My bedside mirror, the one I threw out 2 apartments ago, was sitting on the floor, uncovered. I didn't scream. I didn't touch it. I just turned and faced the wall and waited for daylight. I don't know what she meant by gave me a name. I've never spoken her name, she never told me one. But the more I think about it, maybe I did. Maybe every time I thought about her, feared her, remembered high, gave her shape, and maybe now, that's enough. Because today, when I walked past the living room mirror, just for a second, I saw myself staring back, but I wasn't blinking, and I'm not sure which one of us is telling this story anymore. Uncle Mortician Mystery Part 1. The summer I was sent away there. Are certain things we carry with us from childhood that never quite leave the shape of a shadow cast against your bedroom wall. The scent of something burnt but not smoking, or the memory of a locked door that you were told, under no circumstances, to open. If you're new here, you might want to subscribe. Some stories are best heard late at night, in the quiet, when you're most likely to listen. Because what I'm about to tell you is true, and it's been waiting. It began the summer I turned 15. My mother had taken a job overseas, a short-term contract in Vienna. It sounded glamorous, but she couldn't bring me with her. My father had passed 2 years earlier, and with no one else to leave me with, I was sent to live with my uncle. Henry was a mortician. He lived alone in a large grey Victorian house perched on a hill just outside a small town called Davenport Falls. I'd only met him once before, at my father's funeral. Even then, he had a way of speaking in half sentences, of looking past you as if your soul might slip out, and he didn't want to embarrass you by noticing. My mother never talked much about him, just said he'd always been a bit different. The house was old, the kind that creaked even when no one was walking, and with rooms that seemed to narrow for furniture, but too large to be left empty. A strange, persistent chill lingered there, no matter the heat outside. But it wasn't the age of the place that unsettled me. It was that room, down the hallway past the staircase and the parlor. There was a narrow door. It didn't match the others. This one was solid oak, dark and matte, with a single black iron handle and no keyhole. A deadbolt sat above the knob, always locked. "Don't go near that room," Uncle Henry said on my first night, when I asked what was inside. "It's where I keep old equipment. Dangerous, sharp things. You're not to enter, understood?" I nodded. But of course, that only made me want to know more. That first week passed in slow silence. Uncle Henry wasn't cruel, just distant. He prepared food with quiet precision. Always simple meals, boiled vegetables, poached chicken, unsalted broth. He never ate with me. Instead, he would take his plate to the basement and disappear for hours. Sometimes I heard muffled sounds below. Once or twice I swore I heard water running, but I never saw a bathroom down there. On my 4th night, I woke to a sound I still don't like describing. It was like breathing, but wrong. Ragged, watery, gurgling. It seemed to come from the walls themselves. I sat up in bed and held my breath. The sound came again, low and pulsing like someone struggling through a final breath, over and over. And then ... silence the next morning. I asked Uncle Henry if there were rats in the walls. He looked at me a moment too long, then said flatly, "Nothing lives in these walls. Nothing at all." I began exploring the house during the long, silent days. There was a study with hundreds of bookstick volumes on embalming, anatomy, chemical preservation, historical funerary rites. His desk was stacked with yellowed documents, typed letters, from distant names and funeral receipts dating back over 50 years. Most had the same crest, a crow perched on a gravestone, the same symbol I saw on the ironwork above the main gate when I arrived. I began to notice something strange about the house. There were no mirrors, not one, not in the bathrooms, not in the halls, not in any bedroom. Even framed portraits had faces turned slightly away or were blurred by dust or age. It was as though the house refused reflection. And then there was the locked room, always locked, always cold. I passed it often, sometimes pressing my ear to the wood. Nothing. Other times, I could swear I heard a soft shuffling sound inside. But when I knocked once, just to test, there was a knockback. A soft, deliberate mimic. I didn't tell Uncle Henry by the second week. My unease had grown into quiet obsession. One night, I saw Uncle Henry descend the basement stairs with a bundle, wrapped in black cloth. He moved slowly, carefully, as if the thing inside might break or wake. I waited, then followed silently, barefoot. I didn't go down. I crouched at the top of the stairs. Below, I could make out a faint orange light flickering like candlelight. I heard the sound of water, the sharp clink of metal, and then, murmuring not words I could understand, just a rhythmic whisper, like a chant. I stepped back and returned to bed, but sleep didn't come. That Friday, a letter arrived. I watched Uncle Henry open it at the table. His expression darkened, but only briefly. He folded the paper, placed it inside a drawer, and said, "We'll have a guest tomorrow. I'll need your help preparing the parlor." The guest, it turned out, was not alive. A funeral was scheduled for Saturday. The deceased, Mr. Leonard Craze, was a local man in his 80s, survived by no family. The service would be held in the house itself, as it had once been a combined residence and funeral parlor. Uncle Henry cleaned the downstairs rooms with almost religious diligence. I helped dust and vacuum under his stern eye. "Do not go upstairs during the service," he said firmly, "and don't touch the casket when it arrives." It came that afternoon, delivered by a single man in a black truck, plain pine, unadorned. But what struck me was that it was sealed. No viewing. Uncle Henry wheeled it into the parlor himself, and closed the doors. I sat upstairs and listened as the house filled with whispers and footfalls. I peered once through the banister and saw that the guests were not guests at all but old men and women, dressed in black, their faces covered, with thin black veils. No one spoke. Not even during the so-called service, which was just 10 minutes of silence, broken only by Uncle Henry saying, "He has returned." Returned from where? They left without shaking hands, without eye contact. That night, I heard movement in the hallway. I got out of bed and crept to the door, cracked it open. The locked room was open. The door stood ajar, just slightly. A thin trail of light glowed from the crack. I stepped out, heart pounding, and crept closer. There was a smell like formaldehyde, but sweeter, almost floral. Wrong. I reached out and touched the door. The instant I did, a cold swept over me like a wave. Inside, something moved. Not loud, just shifted. Then a voice, low and guttural, said, "Not yet." I ran. In the morning, the door was shut, the lock back in place. Uncle Henry didn't mention it, but his expression had changed. He watched me more carefully. He seemed tired, more pale than usual, and I noticed something strange. He wore gloves now, even indoors. That day, I ventured down into the basement while he was out collecting supplies. It was colder than I expected. The steps creaked, but didn't echo. There was no real sound down there, like the walls themselves swallowed it. The basement was divided into 3 rooms. 2 were filled with old wooden tables, embalming gear, bottles of preservative chemicals, and shelves lined with what I thought were jars of ash or maybe something else. But the 3rd room, that door was steel. A keypad. I backed away, uneasy, and turned to leave. But as I did, I saw something floating in a large glass tanker about the size of a person. The tank was stained yellow. Inside it was something pale and thin, suspended in cloudy liquid. A shape, a face, or what was left of one. I never told Uncle Henry what I saw. But that night, the knocking came again. Only this time, it wasn't from the locked room. It was from inside my closet. Part 2, the room. Open's eye didn't sleep that night. I sat upright in bed until the horizon began to pale, staring at the closet where the knock had come from. I hadn't dared open it. Hadn't even moved since the sound, a slow, deliberate knock, like bone against wood. Not loud, not frantic, just patient. At dawn, I opened the door. There was nothing inside. My clothes hung stiffly, the smell of mothballs and something sour clinging to the air. I felt the wall with my hands, checked the corners, even knocked softly myself. Nothing responded, but the feeling remained that I hadn't imagined it, that something had tapped back. When I finally went downstairs, Uncle Henry was already seated in the kitchen, sipping tea. He looked up at me with his usual neutral gaze, but said nothing, until I sat down. "You opened it, didn't you?" I froze. "Opened what?" He stirred his tea slowly, his gloved hand tapping the spoon against the cup. "The room, I didn't." "Go in. You touched the door," he said quietly. "It knows." My mouth went dry. "What knows?" He stood, then slowly, carefully unpoured the rest of his tea into the sink. When he turned back, his face had lost its calm. "You'll leave soon," he said. "Before the 13th. I didn't understand. The 13th of what? But he'd already walked out of the room, the basement door closing softly behind him. I started counting the days. There were only 9 left until the 13th. Something was going to happen. Something Henry wouldn't or couldn't explain. The house began to change. It was subtle at first. The cold got worse, settling deeper into the floors, even in the afternoons. The mirrors I'd brought with me in a small makeup kit hand. Mirror, compact, began to show things that weren't quite right. I'd catch my own reflection, blinking a beat too late, or smiling when I wasn't. Once, I saw someone behind me, tall, thin, draped in a black shroud. But when I turned, no one was there. The air in the halls started to feel thicker, heavier. The knocking came again, this time from inside the walls. It would move, first by the fireplace, then in the pantry, then behind my headboard. Always knocking. Always soft, always waiting. I tried to stay out of the house as much as I could, but Davenport Falls was small, and the locals weren't exactly welcoming. When I visited the local library, I asked an elderly clerk if she knew anything about the old mortuary on the hill. She stiffened immediately. "That house hasn't been a mortuary since 1989. I blinked. "But my uncle, he still holds funerals there. He embalms." She shook her head firmly. "Whatever he's doing in that house, it's not licensed. After the death of Gregory Hallen, the town revoked the right to conduct any services there. Too many irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" But she only stared, then muttered, Some things are better left buried. That night, the door was open again, not just unlocked. Fully open, no sound, no light. Just darkness spilling into the hallway like oil. I should have run. Should have locked my bedroom and prayed morning would come quickly. But something pulled me forward. Not curiosity, something colder. Like a hand pressed to my spine. Inside. The room was smaller than I imagined. And colder. It was utterly bare, except for a single long metal table, a drain in the floor, and shelves lined with covered jars. But at the far end, there was a mirror. The only mirror in the house, tall, antique, with a gilded frame that looked like it had once belonged in a cathedral. It was shrouded, like the others. A black cloth draped over it. As I stepped closer, I noticed a sound barely perceptible, whispering. No source, just a pressure against the eardrum, like someone murmuring underwater. The cloth moved slightly, not by air, not by me. It breathed. I reached for it, and then something behind me hissed, "Don't look." I turned, heart seizing, but no one was there. The cloth now clung to the mirror like wet skin. I fled, locked myself in my room, pushed the dresser against the door, and still, all night long, the knocking followed me. Wall to wall, whisper to whisper, like something crawling inside the very bones of the house. The next day, I confronted Uncle Henry. "What's behind that mirror?" I demanded. "What's in that room?" He looked tired, older somehow, like the house was feeding on him too. "There are things you don't understand," he said. "Things I swore to keep sealed. You said it's equipment, that it's dangerous. I saw it's not equipment. That room, it's something else." He didn't deny it. "I didn't build this house," he said quietly. "I inherited it, as my father did, and his father before him. We are keepers. We hold the threshold." "What threshold?" He looked up at me, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "The one that separates the living from what comes after." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It sounded ridiculous, but he didn't smile. "You think death is an end," he said. "It's not. It's a door, and someone has to stand on the other side to make sure it stays shut." That night, I dreamed I was inside the mirror. It wasn't glass. It was water. Thick, dark water. And something was moving in it. A shape, tall and gaunt, with empty eye sockets and arms to long for its body. It watched me with blind patience. And when it opened its mouth, hundreds of voices screamed from it all at once. I woke up screaming. Uncle Henry was already waiting. In the hallway. "It's close now," he said. "You need to leave." But I didn't want to leave. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why my family had chosen this. Why anyone would live with this nightmare. He sighed, and for the first time, I saw the pain behind his stillness. "My brother, your father, was supposed to take my place, but he ran, he left. I never blamed him, but it meant the burden came back to me." "You mean the house?" "I mean the gate," he said. "The mirror is not a reflection, it's an entrance." 3 nights remained. The whispers were louder now. Sometimes I heard my own name. Sometimes I heard sobbing. Sometimes laughter. Uncle Henry never left his room after dark. He lit candles and sat in the parlor all night long, whispering prayers in a language I didn't recognize. The next morning, I found a letter on my pillow. It was in his handwriting. "If you see me go into the room again, do not follow. If the mirror is uncovered, do not look. And if the knocking comes from inside the house, do not open any door, no matter who's asking." Tell your mother I did my duty. I did not let it through. It was signed simply H. I cried when I read it, not because I was scared, because I knew he didn't expect to survive whatever came next. The 13th arrived. The air was heavier than I'd ever felt, as if the whole house were underwater. The lights flickered constantly. The basement door opened on its own, and the knocking came again. But this time it wasn't from the walls, it was from the front door. 3 knocks, heavy, measured. Uncle Henry stood at the threshold, his hands shaking. He looked back at me one last time. It's here. And he walked into the locked room. The door closed behind him, and this time, it stayed open just a crack, enough for me to see what stepped through after him. Part 3. The mirror breathes. Sigh stood frozen in the hallway, heart hammering in my chest. That thin crack of the door, no wider than a hand, seemed to pulse with something dark and alive. Beyond it, I glimpsed movement. Not fast, not erratic, but slow, deliberate, like something ancient stretching its limbs after a long slumber. I should have run. Instead, I stepped forward. There was no sound, no breathing, no creak of floorboards, just the steady throb of my own pulse, louder with every step. The air smelled like something old and wet, the rot of leaves after a rain, but sweeter. 2. Cloying. The black cloth that had once covered the mirror now lay in a heap on the floor. And the mirror was no longer just a mirror. It was rippling, like the surface of water disturbed by sound. The reflection was wrong, not reversed, but twisted. The room inside it was not the one I stood in. It was darker, the angles were off, the walls stretched too far, and standing inside it was Uncle Henry, or something that looked like him. He was barefoot, soaked from the knees down, skin almost translucent, as if drained of something vital. He raised one hand and pressed it to the inside of the glass. On this side, the surface rippled where his hand met it. Then, in perfect unison, he mouthed the words, "It's open." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the cloth. My instinct screamed at me to shut the door, to lock it, to run. But the door no longer had a lock. It hadn't ever, not truly it, had been a seal. The mirror swelled. No other word fits. Its surface pushed outward, bulging like a great bubble of mercury. A face pressed into the curve, long, thin, with hollow sockets and a mouth stitched shut. Its skin was grey and cracked like old paper. I could feel its presence before it even breached. The temperature dropped so fast, my breath became visible. It was coming through just as I turned to flee. A voice rang out from inside the room, not Uncle Henry's, not anything human. 100 voices woven together, some childlike, others shrill, others so deep they seemed to scrape the bones. Return. The mirror sucked inward violently, like the sea reversing a wave, and the figure vanished. Silence. The door clicked closed behind me. I didn't speak for the rest of the day. Didn't eat, didn't leave my room. When night fell, I listened, but the house was quieter than it had been in weeks. No knocking, no whispering, just silence. The next morning, I found the mirror again covered. The room locked. Uncle Henry was in the kitchen, making tea. He looked the same, moved the same. But when I sat down, I noticed something off. He wasn't wearing gloves. His hands were black at the fingertips, not stained, withered. And when he handed me a cup of tea, his reflection in the window didn't move at all. Days passed, nothing returned. No knocking, no voices, no dreams. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like I was living in the eye of a storm, silent, still but temporary. I avoided the mirror. Even covered, it seemed to hum in my presence. The way a dog senses someone. Staring. I began seeing shapes in corners, always just after blinking. Once I caught my own reflection walking away as I stared into the kitchen window. When I turned, of course, there was nothing there. Uncle Henry grew weaker. He barely spoke, barely ate. His skin became translucent, veins showing through like ink. Beneath parchment, I asked him if he was sick. He simply said, I gave it what it wanted. For now, I decided to visit the basement one last time, not out of curiosity, but to understand. To know the truth before I left that house forever. It was darker than before. Dust clung to the walls like mold. The embalming tools were still laid out on the tables, some stained, some broken. The air was thick with damp. I reached the locked steel door at the back and found it slightly ajar inside. I found something that haunts me still. There were drawings on the walls, hundreds of them sketched in chalk, carved into stone, burned into wood, symbols, circles, eyes, spirals, and dozens of mirror shapes, some cracked, some open. In the center of the room sat a wooden chair. Strapped to it, skeletons of small animals, rabbits, cats, even birds. A ritual circle was etched around the floor, and in the far corner, a second mirror, identical to the one upstairs. But this one was broken, shattered straight down the middle. Behind the broken glass was not wall but darkness, depthless. I leaned closer and saw my own face, but wrong, not reversed, not mimicked. It was smiling. I left the house that day. Uncle Henry didn't try to stop me. He just stood on the porch, hands folded, eyes dull. You have time still, he said. Don't waste it. I asked him what would happen when he was gone. He didn't answer, but as I got into the cab, he said quietly, don't keep mirrors in your room. Just a letter sent to my mother, who cried quietly but said nothing. She didn't ask me to go back. I wouldn't have, anyway. But sometimes, I still hear knocking. Once, I heard it from my bathroom mirror. I covered it with cloth. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear it breathe.